team here supporting Mojaloop. And one of the things we're going to do today, we've typically done on the last day, is do some planning work. So for the last 2 days, you've heard some great talks about what we've done in the past and teed up some great information and agendas for what we want to achieve in the future. So this is the time to actually put our roll up our sleeves and jump into the action here. So before we do that, we're going to do a refresh of some of the critical talks by our speakers. They're going to give a 5-minute pitch about why they need your help and what help you can bring to the table. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Pedro and Adrian for the reference architecture. And we'll follow the screen. If you guys need to share something, hopefully you don't, since we're going to keep this light, just let me know.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So over the course of the last PIs, we came to the conclusion that we will need to spend a bit of time refreshing the architecture that we have in preparation for the future of Mojaloop. And that preparation obviously is to increase some technical abilities of the platform and also to increase some benefits and some business side benefits, such things like the ability to replace parts or the ability to extend the platform. With that in mind, we set out to propose and define a reference architecture. And yesterday, we explained what reference architecture is and why it is important. It starts by identifying the multiple parts of the system and how they relate to each other. It puts in place some abstractions. It identifies interfaces and tries to make those interfaces as stable as possible. It proposes solutions to common problems. And it also enforces design principles, such as the ones that we've been agreeing at the DA and enforcing at the DI. The ultimate objective of a reference architecture is to have a nice vision of what good looks like in terms of the technical architecture. So this document is a living document. We really never achieve the perfect architecture, but what we have is a constant view of how should the next version of our product be, and that next version can be out a few months or a couple of years. It doesn't matter. What important is that we have that idea of what good looks like. One of the things that we came up with, or that we have discussed, were the general principles, such things like finding the right level of abstraction, having a single responsibility principle, making sure that all of the parts of the system are decoupled, having proper internal communications patterns, and also making sure that everything we do achieves the fundamental abilities of a platform like ours, which is it needs to be secured, it needs to be performant at scale, cost effective, modular and extensive, which means that it needs to be easy to extend and to add functionality. It should be resilient to failures. It should also be testable to reduce quality issues and facilitate development. And ultimately, it needs to be easy to deploy and to operate. These principles are obviously very important, but everything makes much more sense when we focus on the non-technical benefits, on the business benefits. One of the issues, for example, that came up a couple of weeks ago was a license change from an interface component that we use Grafana. Those things will happen eventually. This one is not the most critical one. However, if this had happened with Kafka or a database that we have, we would be in a bit of a pickle. The problem is that we have a high dependency on the components that we use, in our platform. One of the things that this reference architecture proposes is to put the right level of abstractions even on the interface side, which means that we should be protecting our valuable code, the one that does the business rules, from infrastructure concerns, with the intention that to make it as easy as possible to replace infrastructure components, such as a database or a Kafka or Grafana or whatever. So that is one of the objectives and one of the benefits. Another benefit of this reference architecture or implementing the main aspects that we are proposing in the reference architecture is that we need to be able to extend functionality on the hub, on the switch, without risking too much, risking breaking it. Today, the barrier to entry in terms of so think of a developer that needs to change something or enhance the platform in any way. There's a lot of knowledge that needs to be gained. There's a lot of good understanding of a lot of code that exists that is required for anyone to be efficient at changing the system. This is something that we would also like to adjust. And again, by separating the multiple parts of the system, we will achieve smaller parts. Those smaller parts will have very focused functions, which in turn will facilitate the life of developers whenever they want to do something, change something, even replace some components of the system. This is another part that we have put a very strong focus. It should also be possible to replace those components. So once we understand what exactly are the parts of the system, the discrete parts of the system, and we have interfaces around them, we should be able to change those parts if needed. The case that we see, for example, is Beetle. Beetle will be able to have a huge impact in terms of performance and scalability for a core part of our system. What we see today is that that core part is not separated from some of the other concerns. And again, I am repeating myself, but this is an important point to make. So the ability to have that clean, nice, separated and abstracted architecture with those good interfaces will enable us to have easier code to comprehend, which means the community will have an easier time adding functionality and changing functionality if needed. We'll be able to not depend so much on infrastructure components, which means that not only the platform is more portable or can use other technologies, it's easier to do that as we don't depend on those things. It even has the benefit of providing, it's not an easy thing, I'm making it sound like it's easy, but it's not easy, but it even has the benefit of creating multiple external APIs. Today we have FSPIOP. In the future, we would like to have ISO. Maybe we can have even something else. Again, by having that very clear definition of what the inside of the platform looks in terms of components and what those components do, we can have that. It's easier to change things on the outside and have multiple external interfaces. Last but not the least, all of these changes go into one big benefit or ultra top benefit, which is enabling a marketplace. A marketplace is only as effective if developers can easily contribute to extend our platform. And if everyone can do that, not just big developers, small developers. And yesterday we saw examples from adding or replacing a core component with Beetle, adding FRMS integration, adding a dispute resolution model, or even having the ability to create a very simple Slack mechanism to do the notifications. That is the kind of important benefit that a marketplace should provide. The ability for anyone with a lot of technical skills and a lot of resources, or the small developer, the one developer having an idea, those two types of contributors need to have the same ability to contribute to the platform and extend the platform and make it their own. With that in mind, we came up with a phased approach and a proposal. What we have is a three-phase approach. The first phase for us is the most important phase. We would like to continue the work that we've been doing with the reference architecture workstream. We need to consolidate those stable interfaces, know exactly what they are. And what we need also to do is provide a plan for phase two. Phase two is where we need to have a bit of a discussion later about how should we address this, how should we resource this, because there's a lot of work to do. And there's lots of ways to do this. We can go out and do this completely on the side until we have a version 2 that's ready to start putting back all the effort that we have been doing in version 1. Or we can do this in parallel. Again, there's multiple ways of doing it. We need your help to figure that out in the session that we have today.
Thanks, Pedro. Appreciate that. Okay, Justus, do you want to jump right into risk and fraud?
Yes, please. And I'm also going to steal the share from you, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. So let me set the share. There you go.
Thank you. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. So our plan for the next program increment is we have a number of our functions, Actio functions that you can see here in sequence. Actually, you can't see them very well because they're very small and there's a lot of work that we need to do. But we have so far strung together all of the architectural components and technology that we need to achieve an end-to-end flow across our platform. So we're able to ingest information over here. Our API specifically is currently in almost a test data state. So we're using very similar data schema to what we used in the POC. We'll be updating the API itself, and we'll also be updating or creating an adapter over here so that we can take on data from Mojaloop. And then we're going to do data preparation over here, which is mostly our enrichment functions. And then there's a whole lot of work to be done here around rules and typologies to evaluate a transaction. Our scope for the PI 15 is this part here. So we'll be building our adapter. We'll be building and updating the Actio transaction monitoring service API. And then we'll also be doing our data preparation work through NiFi, where we are ingesting enrichment data from a source. We don't know what that source is yet, but that's part of the work that we'll be doing in the PI. And then just looking forward, this is the work that we'll be doing in the next PI. So the next PI is largely about adding content to the platform. And that would involve building all of the rules and the typologies that we want to use to evaluate transactions coming through the Actio solution. One thing to note here with the rules and the typologies is we will be doing a lot of that preparation work in PI 15, which is why I mentioned it here. So before we can do the development, we'll be breaking down all of the rules and the typologies, or actually all of the typologies, into rules. And you'll see that there's we would really appreciate some support here from knowledgeable people with experience from the community in terms of how fraud is detected in environments that you're familiar with. These three epics, if you want to call it that, summarize the work that we want to do. So building the Mojaloop payment platform adapter, build the Actio transaction monitoring service API, and then implement data enrichment. To note about the payment platform adapter, the work that we demonstrated yesterday as part of the domain-driven design and the architecture that Pedro just spoke about will obviously change that approach. The adapter would become less necessary if the architecture is slightly different, where we can tap into events that are generated within the platform. Then we would have to build a listener and use that listener to then stream data into the Actio solution. But in the meantime, that's not going to be possible. I think there's still a lot of work to do to get the architecture into that state. And even from an Actio perspective, I think it is essential for us to have the capability to provide an adapter anyway. There may be other solutions that need to tap into the Actio platform that will need an adapter. So we want to at least create the foundation for that, even if at some point in the future, Mojaloop won't necessarily use that adapter anymore. It would rather move to an event listener kind of data stream. The kind of support that we think we would need from the community is, I've broken these down. So we would benefit from practical experience from people in the community around DFSPs, their specific needs. We've largely focused on Mojaloop's need as a switching hub, but also from a community perspective wider than that, what would a DFSP need from a small scale fraud risk management platform that they could leverage to detect fraud in their environment? Which DFSPs are there out there that would be interested? And we'd like to talk to them to find out what their needs are. And in addition to that, also switches or switch operators. What would your needs be from a fraud risk management platform? What are your priorities in terms of the kinds of fraud that you want to detect in your region or in your environment or in your specific industry? from a financial crime risk management perspective, if there are specific insights that people would like to share with us, or things that maybe as things to note or trends, or again, specific typologies that have emerged that we should be considering. It's always good to have a well-rounded view of the industry, and it's nice to be able to leverage a group of people with wider experience than just our team. Similar here with the typologies and the rules. Like I said, we're going to break our typologies down into the rules that we need to detect those typologies, and any input and feedback there from the community would be welcome. We are also going to be implementing a number of new components in our final step. We've already implemented NiFi, but it is going to be a core component of the data enrichment service. Keycloak, Ambassador, and that should be gRPC. These are the technologies that we are going to be implementing in detail to support our 3 major activities. If there is any specific pitfalls that you think we need to be aware of, and in particular, we would be driving a conversation through the Design Authority and also any of the architecture forums, just to maybe mark our homework a little bit. We have a very good and strong team from Cybrin and also from Lextago helping us build this, but we don't necessarily expect that all of our people would know everything all of the time. So we would like to double check our thinking and our planning a little bit with the community, and we would work through the Design Authority. But if there is anybody who has any specific experience with some of these tools, you're more than welcome to come and talk to us about your experiences. And then finally, just from a general Mojaloop perspective, Mojaloop knowledge and experience is always welcome in terms of the integration direction that we want to take. So we would be probably now one of the first external solutions that would be integrating with the Mojaloop platform. I think we've done sort of a similar service kind of work with the account lookup service, but the Actio solution as a fraud risk management component is a very discrete and external component. So it would be doing something maybe that hasn't been done before, but we would appreciate the direction from the Mojaloop community, and in particular the architecture forums, on directing that work. Similarly, we would really welcome any learnings and guidance that you have on the security side. How do we make sure that our platform is secure and up to security standards and specifications to be able to properly partner with the Mojaloop platform? This ISO 20022, I think, is probably more of a bilateral support for us. We'd like to keep track of the work that is being done by Michael and the team and Adrian in the ISO 20022 workstream, but also be able to leverage some of that groundwork for the ISO 20022 support for Actio itself as well. And then finally, if we are integrating with Mojaloop, we'd like to leverage any existing support that you might be able to offer in terms of the API itself. Our adapter would look very similar to the API on the incoming end, where the outgoing end of that adapter would be the Actio TMS API, which start more around ISO 20022. So just in summary, where we could really use some help is on the rules translation out of the typologies, some integration design support, the Mojaloop API support, security design support, and if anybody would like to help us develop the product itself and you would like to volunteer some of your time to do that, you're also more than welcome. You can reach me at my email address there or the Mojaloop Slack. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justus. Appreciate that. Okay, and then the next up is Paul.
Hi. Thank you. I'm going to keep this fairly short and sweet, I think. If I could just share my screen briefly. Thank you. I trust you're able to see that now.
We are.
Is it the PowerPoint that you can see?
It's the back end of the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to highlight the fact that we really need to improve the bulk payments solution that we have out there at the moment. Yes, it works very well from the Mojaloop perspective, but it's not really working from the point of view of DFSPs. We're looking at a national payments deployment at the moment, and it's been highlighted that for any large scale deployments, the early use case is very often bulk payments. Sorry, I've completely lost the power of speech.
If you want to take a minute, I can fill in.
No, I think I've got it now, Sam.
Okay, good.
So yeah, an early use case is bulk payments pretty much every time. And that includes various types of bulk payments. It could be social payments, payments in pensions, support for children, whatever a government chooses to do. There can be conditional cash payments, often funded by governments or NGOs. So that might be payments for heads of household, female heads of a household if their children go to school. Of course, the most another extremely common one is salary payments. So if we're going to have a viable solution in any national scale deployment, we have to do bulk payments, and not just any old way. We have to do it well. It's governments, NGOs, large employers all need it. So we need to make it as easy as possible for banks and mobile money operators to offer this function. We have a barrier at the moment. Yes, we can do it, but each of the DFSPs that wants to offer such a functionality has to develop special functionality on their side. Even if after they've got a payments list, they have to do special processing before they can submit it to a Mojaloop hub. We need to remove this barrier, make this vital functionality available to any DFSP that can send us a payments list. So on the deck that I used yesterday, you can see there is this initial stage here, the getting the quote element of the Mojaloop transaction. The additional functionality of which is to take the payments list and source it into DFSPs before we even start processing it. And as I highlighted yesterday, this puts a requirement on every connected DFSP to implement that functionality separately. And when it has to be at every DFSP, it makes more sense from their perspective, at least, to move it into the hub itself. And that requires this change in the functionality so that the hub does all of that. We don't take away the quoting function, so the bank involved and the government department, whoever it is, still has to be aware of fees before they proceed with it. We have to give them the option to say yes or no to the transaction. But having done that, we carry on as before. But all of this should be in the hub, not within the DFSP that's issuing the bulk payments on behalf of their customer, the bank or the NGO. I'd really appreciate any support on this that the community felt able to give. And I think that's all I want to say for the moment. As I said, I keep it short and sweet. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. And and then Michael, we have ISO. Do you want? I can share my screen again, Paul. If you stop sharing.
Yes, I thought it was merchant payments next, but I'm happy
Yeah.
to.
Okay, it is merchant payments. Yes. Go ahead.
Yep.
Do you want to continue
Okay.
sharing?
I'll carry on if you don't mind. Another very common function that we have in pretty much every country that we try to deploy, be it small scale or large scale, is merchant payments. One of the most common transactions that any people are involved in is buying stuff in shops, food, etc. If you think about most countries, particularly emerging countries with limited refrigeration, People are buying fresh food every day, probably a minimum of 2-3 transactions. So even before you consider more general payments, you've already got a minimum of about 14 transactions a week for every family just buying stuff in shops. That's far more than you'll see in bulk payments, in P2P, in paying school fees, or any of the other use cases. Merchant payments are the core in terms of transaction volumes. And currently, we're not supporting it very well with, at best, the version of the mobile money operators rather stilted USSD-based solutions, which don't give you a great user experience. QR lets us leapfrog all of that and relatively easily deploy interoperable QR-based merchant payments. And we can do this by layering it over the basic P2P transaction. And more sophisticated merchant transactions can come later, but we should work to get this in place as quickly as possible. We need to build a range of elements in order to do this on national scale. And I'll just bring up that little diagram, little architectural diagram. So the blue boxes we already have pretty much. We have a Mojaloop hub. We have the ability to interact with DFSPs on the customer and the merchant side. The DFSPs generally have a customer app, a merchant app, and yes, this is smartphone based, but we can also incorporate USSD. We have some plans around doing USSD for this type of payment if we absolutely have to. And yes, I know we do absolutely have to in many countries. But we need to build, in order to do QR codes properly, we need merchant registry, because we have to deal with fraud against merchants and by merchants, and money laundering as well is a key issue. I've worked in a number of countries where monitoring what merchants do, and particularly what one or two fraudulent merchants do in terms of establishing a business, closing it down, opening another business under another name, or operating 2 or 3 imaginary businesses. All of that we have to keep on top of if we're going to do this properly. We need a QR code repository where we can keep static QR codes for distribution to merchants. And we need a QR code processor which brings it all together and interacts with the customer's DFSP and the merchant's DFSP, serving up the static QR codes to begin with, but also checking whenever a transaction is used, the translation between a merchant ID and merchant DFSP details, so that we can keep on top of that fraud issue, and also provide via the Mojaloop hub the alias, the ALS/Oracle routing for that merchant payment, and also providing the integration point for international QR code transactions as well, which are obviously further down the roadmap. But this is this, I would argue, is a very high priority. It allows us to do a high profile merchant payment solution using the emerging dominance, if you like, of QR codes in many countries. And we can do it quickly and easily, frankly, compared to many of the other things we could do. This is a relatively easy win. So I'd say that we could do something that can offers a solution that can address probably 90% of face-to-face shop purchases in a model that customers we know like. So please support us. We need help developing those green boxes. Thank you. And back to you, Kim.
Thank you very much. Okay, Michael, you are up next. I don't know if you had anything to share.
Yes, I was going to share, Kim, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, seeing that.
Now we are, yep, all good.
Fantastic. Okay, so first of all, ISO 20022. I just want to say, before I start talking about that this is one of the most important things that we can be doing in Mojaloop. I understand that in the community there are some reservations about the bank-centeredness of ISO 20022, but there's no doubt that we get asked a great deal about whether or not Mojaloop will support this, and it's fundamentally important, I think, that we find a way of doing that. So what have we done? This PI, well, we've got a proposed mapping of ISO 20022 message types to Mojaloop endpoints, which will cover, certainly for the P2P use case, we think, a way of managing to retain our identity and the important parts of our offering while using ISO 20022 message types. We've mapped other use cases in outline, and we've also identified that the way in which we're doing PISP will need more detailed work in order for us to be able to incorporate it into an ISO 20022 based system. We've also implemented a working proof of concept using ISO messages. You saw a demonstration, I hope, yesterday of the hackathon. So we're in a reasonably good place at the moment. We think we've got these messages. We also have a real requirement. As we said, there's a national payment switch. It's live. It's already using ISO 20022 messaging, and it wants to use Mojaloop because it's a sensible system. We need to extend the use cases to at least merchant payments and bulk payments, as Paul's just been saying, and we will also subsequently need to extend it to PISP. So it's important that we can move forward quickly in that area and make sure that we have a sensible ISO-based solution for PISP. The immediate requirements that we have are, first of all, a proof of concept. So that we can demonstrate, and indeed the switch operators can demonstrate to their stakeholders that this really does work. It's got to work in the way it works now because they can't afford time for their DFSPs, their participants, to make changes to the way in which their functionality works. So our plan initially is for a proof of concept which uses Payment Manager to consume and produce ISO messages, but uses standard FSPIOP API calls, our existing internal calls, in the switch. Next, we will need to have a production system which uses Payment Manager to map the restricted message set that they are using onto the full Mojaloop message set, and which uses ISO 20022 internally in the switch. So going back to what Justus was saying in his presentation, we would like to be able to be storing ISO 20022 messages so that they can be used, for instance, by a fraud and risk management system, and so that we can demonstrate to everybody's satisfaction that we can use the ISO messages. The existing system uses a restricted set of endpoints. It doesn't include the quote section, the two messages that we propose to use for that. So that's what we would fill in with Payment Manager in the production system. Our conclusion is we can support a broad range of Mojaloop use cases. This will be native support. And we will need to do some more work to make it clear that what it is that is required for the Mojaloop system to use ISO messages. But we won't constrain the use of other ISO 20022 data items by participants to communicate with each other. And as we've said, there is further analysis required. So what do we propose next? First of all, a detailed plan for PISP implementation using ISO messages, and that won't necessarily just be existing messages. We think we may need to extend and propose new ISO messages to cover the areas of PISP that we do using our in-switch model for PISP communication. Second, we want to implement, well, actually two versions of Mojaloop using Payment Manager for demonstration purposes and the Payment Manager and core changes for production purposes. We also want a business justification for some changes that will be required in order to provide proper support in Mojaloop for ISO 20022, and we want to submit that to the ISO 20022 Standards Committee. And finally, we want to do some product placement. As Adrian said yesterday, we think that it's not simply the case that we want to say to people, you can use ISO 20022 messages if you like. We want to say Mojaloop provides a way off the shelf of doing a proper payment system using ISO messages. You don't have to go through the often protracted process of deciding what and how the messages you're going to use are going to be. If you take the ISO Mojaloop, then that is all worked out for you, and all you need to do is go to your participants and say, here's how to use it. So that's our plan for the ISO 20022 workstream. Moving on now to currency conversion, or possibly foreign exchange. We have a proposed solution. You saw it yesterday. The objectives of this solution are, first of all, minimize the footprint of the foreign exchange provider, i.e. don't require it to be a full participant in the system in terms of the API endpoints that it needs to support. We wanted to allow the currency conversion process to be managed either by the participant DFSPs or by the switch. We wanted to make an FXP transfer single hop, and we wanted to make this a non-breaking change for the existing API. As you've seen, we have a proposed model for agreement, so it would work. Proposed model for transfer. And a proposed model for transfer using a switch. We need to build actually the last two endpoints only for MVP. Just something to ask an FXP to make a commitment to a conversion, and the commitments endpoint to ask an FXP to approve the completion of a currency conversion and return the fulfillment. So it's going to be a simple API. We think it's going to be much easier for potential foreign exchange providers to join Mojaloop schemes. And it will also, as I said, do a single hop transfer. So we shan't need to put the requirements on the switch that we do to do things like telescoping timeouts and things like that to make sure that there's proper orchestration between all the parts of a transfer. It's simpler. Changes we want to make to the FSPIOP API, as you see, the key point here is that there is a relatively small number of them and they are all optional. So they should represent non-breaking changes to the API definition. So that's what we've proposed. For PI 14, we would like to do, first of all, the changes for the FSPIOP API that you saw on the last slide. Second, a definition and agreement of the foreign exchange API. Third, changes to the core code to support multiple reservations and commitments. It's a characteristic of this solution that the switch will get two conditions and therefore will need to make two reservations and two fulfillments, and therefore will need to make two commitments of funds. So the switch will do both the commitment, sorry, the reservation from the payer DFSP and the FXP in the same pass, and it will need to do the commitment of funds from those parties also in the same pass. So that's that. I'm sorry, no, it's not. We plan also a working demonstration of an FXP in a transfer stream and worked examples of clearing and settlement models. You may recall that Miller raised the question of how we were going to get potential foreign exchange providers to play nicely in a Mojaloop context. So we will do some work on that. And that's what we propose. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Michael, appreciate for that. Okay, so next up we have Warren. Let me reshare my screen. Unless Warren, were you going to share something?
Oh, I feel left out if I didn't share something at this point.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. Okay,
but I'll keep it very short because I think we are all running out of time now.
Yeah, we're close.
Okay, so just a reminder from yesterday. I think you can see my screen. In the business process workstream. We're really at a point now where we have an excellent understanding of the common business processes that any hub operator, anybody that is trying to run a Mojaloop system needs. We understand those gaps, we understand the minimum requirements, and to support our adoption efforts, we really need to get to a place where we can demonstrate that Mojaloop fills those. So today we're going to go through with the community and basically ratify the conversations we've had in the past PI around the priority of those work streams, or business processes, sorry, that we're going to be looking at, and break it down into the epics we would like to be targeting for PI 14 delivery. A key part of this will be the operator audit trail, making sure that we've actually got Maker Checker baked into everything that we do, and that there is a standard framework for that going forward, so that as Pedro mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that we are actually able to scale out the work to deliver and expand and extend the Mojaloop offering at the core. So we will be running a work stream breakout on this. I look forward to everybody joining the conversation to be able to agree the path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Godfrey. Godfrey, do you have anything, or should I?
No, I'll just talk over. So I didn't prepare anything.
That's fine. It wasn't expected, so.
Okay, perfect. And thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. So I'll just start by pledging support on some of the work stream that they've already asked for one. And starting with the reference architecture work that Pedro has presented, there's quite a number of overlapping kind of like functionality and security aspects of it. And will actually be part of their phase 1 solutions architecture mapping to make sure that we align in terms of the standards we're using around security, authentication, and identity. So that will actually be the first point of us, offering help. The second point wherein we have identified that we can exploit further, it is the discussions that is also connected to what Pedro was alluding to in terms of making our architecture more adaptable and a little bit more flexible, wherein we don't have to build everything ourselves and own it. And the wake-up call that we had around AGPL from Grafana is one of it. So we'll explore that in terms of what is available that we can actually consume without having to own everything, bringing everything that is kind of like not within our license landscape inside. So we'll look at that. And also to respond to you, Justin, we will reach out to you just to have a look at what you've already built on your architecture, and we can overlay it with some of the best practices that we already have, and also do a little bit of more of a detailed threat analysis and also baseline it against some of the best practice controls that we've already have. So those are the areas that we will actually pledge out for support. And optionally, if it moves, around the overlay of the OTP, ensuring that the authentication between the PSP endpoint as well as the originating TFSP is secure, we will reach out to NextGen, which is the organization that volunteers to work with the PSP team around it. And internally to ourselves, we'll still continue to look at our existing epics around cloud native security. We have actually set up the mini loop, and we are fortunate to have somebody with relevant experience in the space, but we are asking for more people to join it so that we can actually draw from all multiple knowledge. So this is pretty much a new space. So there's no cast in stone in terms of how you approach cloud native security from a compliance and data protection perspective. And the second part is also around implementation support. So far, only Mojaloop has been taking advantage of our offer to help them to align with what we do. But I think there are new implementations that are here. We've got tips, we've got Mainma. So we'd like to reach out to them as well to say for any other, challenges that they'd like to bring to us for support, so that we can reach them out and support them as well. But we'll still continue to engage with Mojaloop where they need us the most. And identity and access management is a big thing. So Amy has actually, paved a way forward in terms of introducing the crypto, abstraction layer into the Mojaloop. And the work has already started, and we just need to, add more functionality to it. So what we've actually demoed now was just the file authentication, and we'll move on to build the signature verification function, upon which we will add encryption and decryption of messages. Data protection lab, where Victor is focusing much more on benchmarking. We will act upon the recommendation we have done, and we'll actually look at the OS and the databases, work with the core team to make sure that those recommendations are implemented. And yes, anybody else with any experience around that area, you can jump in and be part of us. And also, which is part of our core, month, kind of like PI to PI maintenance work. It is around our code factory. So we'll actually have a look at, all the other improvements project that we've identified, like ensuring that our releases are automated, and also the fact that, our checks can be bypassed, for licenses as well as container scanning. We will actually look deeply into how we do our CI/CD pipeline workflow and make sure that we fix all the flaws that Victor was actually pointing out. That is in a nutshell, the key epics that we'll cover and the key task. And anybody else who wants to jump in and contribute, please feel free to reach out to me or Kim or Sam or anybody that is actually working on the core team for this platform. Thanks, and over to you, Kim.
Great, thank you, Godfrey. Lewis, I'll have you do PISP and Sandbox, and then Simeon will take it home.
Sure.
Do you need to present?
I did prepare some, yeah.
That's fine.
I do.
Okay, all good.
I wasn't going to, but everyone else did, so I felt left out.
It's peer pressure.
Hi guys, it is peer pressure. Not too bad though. Hi everyone. So on the PISP slide, I think we talked a bit about this already, so we don't really need to talk about too much. So let me know if you can't see my screen, but I'll just kind of keep powering on because I know we don't have long. So these are just the slides we kind of had from yesterday. Our goal for the next PI is to enable a hackathon and even run a hackathon. I think that's like a really nice, ambitious goal to have, and it will tie together a whole bunch of things from the front-end development demo side to the integration work, which needs to be done, to also some kind of marketing side and documentation writing, which is really, really important. So this is kind of what we had down. I think in terms of talking about resources, this epic number 3 here is already covered by the existing resourcing that Google's been providing. So we definitely need people's help here. Now, I think there's also a couple opportunities which you've highlighted around merchant request to pay. And I think there might be an opportunity to dovetail with what Paul has been sharing around QR code to merchant request to pay examples and enabling that for PISP. Also, there's kind of the automation piece, which is like a nice to have, but also lays the groundwork to automating kind of this future work away, so we don't have to keep on doing it over and over again. So that's our proposal for PI14. We're going to have a breakout session for the PISP stream, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just to talk about some community asks. These are our kind of 4 big asks: documentation, integration work, front-end work, and marketing, and helping us drive some of that. I know that there's a few people in the community who are already we have lined up to ask some of these things, especially maybe the DFS lab guys, and I know Innocent from Hypepo is interested in a hackathon along the PISP lines, so maybe that's part of the marketing covered. But yeah, that's what we have for PISP. More generally as well, we can always use more help. We can always, whether that's development work, whether that's documenting, whether that's giving us doing some testing and feedback and whatnot. Cool, that was 2 minutes. So that means I have 7 minutes for the next one. Hopefully, I won't take that long. The other piece that I've been asked to talk about, and we haven't really gone over it much in explicitly in the convening, but it's been a kind of probably a common thread for a lot of the stuff that we're talking about with Mojaloop, and that is the one of Sandbox and demos and documentation. And I've kind of thrown them all into one. And we've been talking about them in a few places, the Community Council and the Product Council. There's an existing demos working group as well. We've also got a technical writer, Uduak. I'm not sure if he's here today, but he's done a great job at kind of baselining and looking at our current documentation and helping us to define a path forward and then going ahead and implementing that as a first pass. We have a basic sandbox. It's okay. It's a kind of hacky first pass thing that we did, and I think it's starting to tie together some of the existing demos that we have. So I'm hoping that we can use that as a launching pad for a lot of this other effort. So I mean, we thought really hard, long and hard about the PISP stuff. I haven't spent as much time on here, so I'm sure I'm going to skip over things. So welcome to have more conversation after this section about how to expand on these things. But really, I think the 4 big opportunities that we've covered, especially in the group that we've had inside the Community Council, has been around really designing and articulating what is that onboarding flow for the different newcomers to the Mojaloop community. And that touches on so many different things. It touches on a demos, it touches on a sandbox, it touches on our communications strategy, it touches on our metrics and how do we measure that code is being written or measure that the community is growing or those sorts of things. And I don't know if Brian's here, but we in our recent group, we've also kind of been talking a lot more about the pilot in the box concept, which sounds like it's close to being something that could be done. The goal really for that, and I'm sure I'll butcher it, so happy to have Brian or Sam correct me, is to enable someone, a scheme, prospective scheme, or even a group of DFSPs to go from nothing to transferring real money in a real scheme as soon as possible. So that is taking what we currently have in Helm and then what we currently have in some of the donated infrastructure as code contributions and getting that fit for purpose, getting that automated, easy to use. I think a lot of the work will be partly integration, but also documentation, also templates and scheme rules. And the idea that we've been kind of going over in our heads is around using this and consuming this ourselves as a part of the Mojaloop community as the sandbox. Like I said, we have a current kind of sandbox, but it doesn't demonstrate a full security model. It doesn't have a nice front end. It's not pretty. So the other piece here is demos. And it sounds like there's already a few demos that are in the works. We've got existing demos that aren't easy to demo. So how do we make demos persistent? How do we put them in one place? How do we tailor the right types of demos to the right types of people? Maybe a demo that shows the individual API calls in the testing toolkit is great for one audience, but that's not really the type of thing that a prospective hub operator, it's not always the right. We just need to figure out the right audience to the right demo, is what I'm trying to say. I'm sure I'm forgetting something really important, but that's okay. I know there's chat messages. I don't know if they're related to what I'm talking about. So let me just have a quick look. QR codes. Yeah, I think that's all I really had there. In terms of our asks for the community, it's helping with documentation, it's helping with writing stuff. It's tying together the existing training program to what we currently have. It's and it's integration work. And I think especially that pilot in a box is a big piece, because I think that could be almost a grounding point for a lot of this other stuff. That's all I had. So yeah, thanks Kim, thanks everyone. and I'm looking forward to the breakout discussions shortly.
And Simeon's up next to talk a little bit about the community and to tee us up for a group photo.
Yes, sure. Actually, Lewis mentioned half the stuff that was on my plate, which
Oh,
is
sorry.
That's all right. It is
Great minds think alike.
Yeah. Just as a background, in the last PI, the Community Council broke itself up into 3 project teams, one for documentation, a second that focuses on sandbox and demos that Lewis has spoken about, and the third one, which is onboarding strategy and tools that Sam has been leading. And the purpose of these project teams was essentially to bring together all the thinking around the community in various groups, whether it's the community council or private council or the various work streams, and sort of come up with a direction to bring each of these 3 items to a finish line. So we've got some really great progress in documentation, which we're hoping to bring to a close in the next PI. I won't speak too much about the sandbox and demos. You've seen some of what Lewis's work has mentioned. There is one piece that Lewis hasn't mentioned that I do want to highlight here, which is the community growth objective. In the last PI, we've been working on developing a list of who is in the community and the constituencies that make up our community and who's on the fringe, and figuring out engagement strategies to bring them in. Some of those engagement strategies will likely start to fall in place this coming PI. Lewis has mentioned the hackathon. That's part of the plan there. Things around events, webinars, hackathons, as well as opportunities in outreach and advocacy. So there is lots of room in any of the project teams to engage and bring those items to a close. And they've been really active. I'm grateful for the leads, that's Kim, Lewis, Sam, and Woodrock as well on the documentation side. And on the community growth piece, again, this is likely to come up in the next community council, this quarter for the community council, to begin to map out the targeted constituencies and engagement strategies and put them in and just action them. And then hopefully we can round all that up with some good metrics to go. That roundly brings us to break time. I invite every one of you to unmute your video and we can take a quick screening, just so that, oh, look at all those happy smiling faces. That's always nice. Paul and I often talk about how soon we can be all together again. Oh, wow. Hello, everybody. Wow. This is so cool.
Good.
It's good to see new faces, old faces, faces I haven't seen in a while. This is really great. Thank you all for turning on your videos. I will do a customary wave at you. Please wave back if you can. It's a very weird African thing about waving at each other. So there we go. Awesome. Alyssa, do we have a screening?
We do. Give me just 1 minute. I'm going to get a second one, and I'll tell you when.
Okay.
All right. If we maybe can do one more customary wave. Give me just a second. And 3, 2, 1. Awesome. All right. All set.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I believe we go into voting next. Kim, do you want to lead us there?
Yes, thank you very much. So what we're going to do is to go with voting. We don't have tons of time to do the voting, and we're doing voting a little bit different this time. Each person gets one vote only, and if someone could put the SurveyMonkey in the chat too, so it's clickable. And really what you're doing here when you're voting, you're actually signing up to contribute to a work stream for this next quarter, to our next PI session. So whether that be, showing up to meetings, volunteering your time, participating in writing code, maybe it's bringing in someone from your organization or your team to help with participation of writing code or quality checks or requirements gathering. So it could be really any level of contribution we talked about here, but you're actually physically saying that if you vote for something, you're going to be accountable for helping out on that work stream. So that's something that we're doing a little bit different. We want to make sure that we have resources resources to support these work streams. So we're giving people times to vote, and then exactly at quarter after the hour, we're going to come back here and break out into 4 work streams. And those work streams are here. And so we've preceded these work streams, not to say the other work streams are not important. They're critically important too, and we'll still go ahead and do PI planning for these, but we just wanted to do the PI planning for these 4 critical work streams, simply because these were the ones that really require the community discussion to be taking place. And what we'll do is, for some of you that have been involved in past events, we're going to fill out what we call a program increment planning board, which will show us all the different milestones and epics we want to achieve for this particular quarter. And then we'll come back as a work group and actually report back on those. So anybody that's in that work stream will come back and report on those features and epics. The work stream owners will facilitate that. We'll also bring back any risks we have associated with those work streams, the objectives we want to accomplish with those work streams, and we'll do a confidence vote in those work streams as well. And again, it's really about planning for the next quarter of work. So again, the next step is let's go ahead and vote. And then we will reconvene at quarter after and break out to one of those individual work streams. Any questions? Great. So with that, please go ahead and vote, take a break, and come back ready to participate in a work stream.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay, I think the plan is we're going to end this session and then we're going to jump into the Workstream session.
I just posted the link to the next session. So if everybody wants to hop off this one and go into the next one, that would